Yeah.
I don't know if you saw the
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Jesus loves you a lot.
Yeah.
Got it on YouTube. And then I'll just take another few seconds. There we go. And then I'll just take another few seconds. See, everything you say is out there. All right. Hey, y'all, Pastor Emil here with another episode of Sweet Jesus. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Ice cream is sweet, but Jesus is far, far sweeter. Thanks for tuning in again. It's a little early for ice cream. My friend Tom here is not looking to have ice cream at 10 o'clock in the morning, and honestly, neither am I at this point. I got to take it easy. I like ice cream a little bit too much. But instead, I've got some tea here. Earl Grey is my favorite. Got some honey in there to help make it extra sweet. So pull up a cup of coffee with some sugar, some tea with honey. Maybe you're watching this later on in the afternoon or evening and you got yourself a brownie, a cupcake, or maybe a bowl of ice cream. Maybe a Haagen-Dazs bar. That's my new, my new go-to. And pull up and enjoy with us as we talk about how sweet Jesus is. And I got Tom Abney in here today. Tom and I met at an SMA meeting a couple of months ago, maybe 2 or 3 months ago, and they have a part of the meeting that they try to do each month where they allow somebody to kind of share their testimony. Tom shared his testimony, and when I heard his testimony, I said, hey, Tom, you got to come in and share this. You got to share this with the world. So, Tom Abney, what's so sweet about Jesus, brother?
Well, Jesus lifted me up from the pits of hell. As a matter of fact, I was December 1st, 1982 is when I gave my heart to the Lord, and everything's been fantastic since then.
So this is a very fitting day.
Yes.
40 years.
That's right.
Exactly today.
How did you know that?
You just said it. I didn't know that, but clearly the Lord did.
I didn't really think about that till I saw it on my calendar. I said, that's pretty cool.
Well, you know,
it was a Wednesday night service. Yeah.
Wow, Wednesday night service. Yeah. There were some interesting events that happened to switch from what we originally had, which was next Thursday.
Yeah.
I had a guy scheduled to come in here today. He canceled on me on Tuesday night, and I have a meeting now on December 8th that I can't really say no to.
Yeah.
And that all happened in the span of about 24 hours. And I said, hey, Tom, you want to come in December 1st? Turns out that's what God wanted the whole time.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. So tell us about December 1st, 1982. Jesus saves you from the pits of hell. What is that? What's all wrapped up in that?
Whoa, my gosh. Yeah, well, first of all, I was Pastor Moore, St. Angelo, was doing a service that night. And we came from kind of similar backgrounds. He had a previous marriage with 2 boys, and I had a previous marriage with 2 boys. And I kind of related to him in a special way. And it just kind of opened my heart to relate to him that I needed Jesus in my life.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what led up to that? Why were you looking? What was it that you were?
Well, first of all, I'm born and raised here in Slidell. There's not many of us left here. A lot of natives have moved in since then, but it's kind of neat growing up in Slidell as a child. You could get on your bike and ride from one end of town to the other, and your mother would say, be home at dark. You know, back then as a child, me and my friends that I grew up with in Slidell, we've often talked about what a great city it was to be a child and grow up in the times that we did in Slidell, Louisiana. It's pretty neat. And come from a family of four, two brothers and a sister. And I graduated from Slidell High in 1969. And during those years, my mother, as a child, we went to church on Sunday, no questions asked. And, those were pretty formidable years developing as a child. But as I got older, I kind of drew away from my childhood upbringing of going to church and being rebellious. And at a young age, first time I took a drink, I was, I guess, 15 years old. And, from that time till December 1st, 1982, I was, didn't call myself an alcoholic, but pretty much every time I take a drink, I would, basically get a buzz. So
yeah.
I guess that's what it was. But, and that was not a good time in my life.
Yeah, 15, that's pretty young.
Yes.
Is that friends or?
Yeah, a friend of mine. Yeah. His daddy had some moonshine in the garage, and we took advantage of it. Yeah. It's kind of nasty, really.
Yeah, it is pretty nasty.
It's nasty stuff.
You only drink that for one reason.
Yeah, yes, exactly right.
To get that buzz, like you said.
Yeah.
So, I mean, did you just start doing that regularly at 15, or it was just sort of the beginning and then something that cropped up later?
That was sort of the beginning. In high school, I was a three-sport athlete, football, basketball, baseball. I led 3 years in all three sports. God really blessed me as far as athletic ability and talent. I was really blessed in having those abilities to do that. And as I got older in high school, I was my senior year in high school, I was approached by a scout from Ole Miss. And a guy named was Grant Moller. I'll never forget it. He approached me and he says, he saw one of my games here at Slidell, and he says, "How would you like to come to Ole Miss on a football scholarship?" I said, "Man, that would be awesome." So we got to communicating and come down to the that's either the day or 2 days before I was supposed to go sign my scholarship. He called me up. He says, "Tom, I got some bad news for you." I said, "Really?" I said, "What's that?" He says, "Well, your scholarship offer came down between you and a kid from Mississippi, and we chose the kid from Mississippi." So there I am, thinking I'm going to Ole Miss to play football, and bam, I get slapped upside the head with that. So that was kind of a rude awakening.
Disappointment.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And that just kind of drew me a little deeper into drinking and depression and carousing and things of that sort. That really, really upset my life. But I guess God had a different plan, me not knowing that at the time, of course. Mm-hmm. So a friend of mine and I were driving through Lafayette when we were going to the western part of the state to visit his family. We stopped in at school in Lafayette, and I said, "This looks like a good place to go to school." So I signed up there.
Nice.
Yeah. And so anyhow, I went there as a freshman, and I walked on. It was too late to walk on for the football team. I thought about that, but the baseball was just, their fall ball was starting. So I said, "Well, let me give that a shot." I was an all-state baseball player, so I was pretty good. So Bobby Bannon was the coach at the time, and he saw how my athletic ability and my skills were in baseball, and then he said, "Man, we're going to offer you a scholarship." So rather than going to class every day, I went to the keg every night, which was a bad idea.
Yeah.
And during fall ball, I was pretty good. I led the team in a couple of categories, and come to find out, come December, I got my grades. They were not so good.
Yeah,
so
you kind of got to go to class.
It kind of goes along with your scholarship. You have to go to class, but I didn't do that. So I partied my way right out of school, and that led me into deeper depression. I went to night school at Southeastern with a buddy of mine and took some classes, and I finally after 4 semesters of being a second semester freshman, I decided college wasn't for me. So that was wasn't my thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think more and more people are realizing that today, but maybe a topic for another time.
Yeah, exactly. So I met this young lady. She was from Alabama. It was kind of a fling. We decided to get married. I did at a very young age in 1971, and had the whole time I was married to my first wife. Things weren't good. Constant bickering and fighting and arguing. But the best thing that happened was my 2 older boys, Tom Jr. and Scott. That's the best thing that could happen to me out of that marriage. We divorced, separated. She moved back to Alabama with them. And I went into a deeper depression, more drinking and carousing. And it's come to be, I was kicked out almost every ballroom in Slidell, which was, one of the things I get from being a carouser like that. But all this time, when you're in sin, you're doing wrong deep down inside. Something inside of you is telling you what you're doing is wrong. So eventually, I said, look, this has got to stop. So the lady I'm married to now, my wife Fifi, we had got together back in when I separated from my wife. So we started going to church with her mother at First Assembly of God. And on that Wednesday night service, everything changed my life from then on.
Morris St. Angelo was there that night?
Yes, he was.
Was that the church he was at, or was
he was
an
elder at the church at that
was
time?
He?
Yes, he was before he started his church.
Okay.
Yes.
So what was it that you heard that night? Was it something you heard, or was it just an encounter with God? Obviously, I think God works through His Word, through the preaching of His Word also. So, what was it that happened to knock some sense into you?
Well, that's exactly what I needed. I can't really recall what the message was that night, but when he did the altar call, I just felt the calling on my heart that this is what I need to do to straighten my life out. And me and my wife, now we both went up and were saved that night, so it's kind of neat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what changed with that? What was it that receiving Christ, believing in Jesus, handing yourselves over to Him, just kind of, hey, take what we got left?
Yeah.
What changed? How did it change?
Well, I mean, you just get a whole different perspective on life. All the things you did in the past really didn't mean anything anymore. I didn't have the need to drink or carouse or do anything like that. It just totally did a 180. And it's kind of funny. I was from my previous life. I got to teach in Sunday school there. My first lesson I had was turn the other cheek. Which is kind of humorous since I was a fighter and a bouncer in the ballroom. God does have a sense of humor, but I'll never forget that. That was my very first lesson. I taught junior high boys that I taught to my boys, which was kind of neat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes people resist God, resist Jesus, and I think it's something we all struggle with daily. I know I struggle, like, okay, Lord, what do you want me to do today? But, here are my plans. So just make sure you keep it within my plans.
Yeah.
Right? I think we all have a tendency to do that sometimes. But what you're kind of highlighting, I think, is that when you finally are willing to just say, hey, God, whatever.
Yeah.
Clearly, my plans are not all that great.
Funny story. I graduated with 4 pastors: Jerry Cochran, Jody Woodward, Gerald Stevens, who was a professor at the seminary in New Orleans East, and they all worked on me.
Wow.
During my formidable rowdy years. So I was kind of didn't have a chance. I was predestined to be saved. Yeah, that was kind of neat that I did graduate with 4 pastors in my class. It was kind of neat.
Wow. Yeah. Well, but I think that also that's a helpful thing for people to keep in mind. You know, you have people in your life that you want to know Jesus. Right?
Yeah.
You want them to encounter Christ and to have the hope and the joy and the peace and all that stuff that you have. And it seems like it's just never going to work.
Yeah.
All right. But that's got to have been a few years, right? You graduated in 1969.
Yes.
And then it wasn't until 1982.
Correct.
You know, so that's 13 years.
Yeah.
It takes a while.
Yeah.
You got to have some patience.
Yeah. And all along, I didn't know this, but they were praying for me.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe some lessons for us today, me and listeners, anybody. If there are people that you want to taste and see that the Lord is good, pray for them and slowly but surely work on them.
Yeah.
But also, those are the people that are eventually going to have some kind of impact. It wasn't them that led you to the Lord, right? I mean, that wasn't...
They tried.
They tried.
Yeah.
But then everything they'd been doing, I don't think it was wasted.
Yeah.
Right?
No, it wasn't.
It just took somebody from the outside to finally, click, right?
Someone I could relate to. That's correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
someone you can relate to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are people out there that we will each individually better relate to.
Yeah.
I don't relate to everybody.
Yeah.
Not everybody looks at me and goes, "Oh, I'm like that guy." Especially because I'm a pastor.
Yeah.
I mean, most people are not pastors.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
But, you said you had a previous marriage with 2 boys, right? These simple little things that are able to draw people in ways that even people that love them like crazy and have been working on them for years can't draw them in.
Correct.
But we got to be open to being used for those things.
God put someone in my life that I could relate to.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So if you got somebody out there that you're praying, if you're not praying for them, you should be praying for them. Somebody you want to know Jesus, pray for them, and pray that God leads the right person, and then just keep gently working on them.
Yes.
With your own your own witness, right?
Yeah.
What was it? What was it that kept you drinking and carousing, as you said, right?
Yeah.
Like, was there a sense that, it starts with disappointment, right? So when I hear your story, it makes me kind of go, well, this is something that relates to a lot of people today. We often think about the gospel as you're a sinner and sin needs punishment, and Jesus took the punishment so that you aren't punished. You just have to receive Jesus, believe in Jesus, and you'll get this gift, and you get to live forever with God in heaven. I'm not saying that's false, okay?
Yeah.
But I think today most people it doesn't resonate with them. That message doesn't resonate with them because they don't think they're bad. We have a culture that kind of says you sort of make up what's right and wrong.
Yeah.
Right? So that doesn't mean that there isn't actual right and wrong, but I'm thinking how do you reach them? And your story, I think, shows that your hopes were really wrapped up in being able to play football for Ole Miss.
Yes.
And then even baseball and being the best at baseball wasn't enough to make up for the fact that you couldn't play football at Ole Miss.
Right.
Right? And then drinking wasn't enough to make up for the fact that you couldn't play football at Ole Miss. Right? And so I think everybody relates to that in the sense that we all wind up breaking the first commandment. We have other gods. We have other things that we think are everything.
Yeah.
We have other things that we think our lives are completely dependent upon, right? Like, I'll never get my life back on track because that stupid kid from Mississippi got the scholarship and not me. So when you receive Christ, it seems like it's not so much about being forgiven as it is now I don't need all those things I thought I needed.
Yeah.
Is that fair? Does that sound?
Yeah, I guess for 13 years I was trying to bury my disappointment, more or less, and it just finally caught up with me. Enough is enough.
Yeah.
It's time to straighten your life out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We all face disappointment.
Yeah.
No matter what. But when you don't have Jesus, you don't have a stabilizing force. You don't have an anchor in the storm.
Yeah.
Does that sound fair? Is that your experience?
Absolutely. Yeah. And another thing, we were talking earlier before we came in here about the parable of the talents. The master giving the talents, one bearing his talent, and that often bothered me throughout my life that I buried my talent that God gave me. But as I told you, I guess God had different plans.
Yeah, burying the baseball talent.
Correct.
Yeah, because you were best hitter on the team.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's like I said, God had different plans, and if I would have went on and pursued that career, it probably would have been a disastrous story because of my indulgence in what I was doing.
Well, yeah, you just have more access to more
Correct.
things to
Correct.
numb the disappointment.
That's
And I think we see that in professional sports. I mean, there are guys and they make it and they're okay. But then there are guys that make it and they're not okay.
Right.
And it's so it's not success that makes you not okay. It's you're not okay, and it doesn't matter what you get. It's not going to be enough.
That's right.
And that's success is actually disappointing because it doesn't take away all your other disappointments. It doesn't fill that spot that God's got.
Yes.
Right. It's his spot
That's
right
right.
here. That's his spot, not anything else's.
Yeah.
And being the best baseball player in the world would have been just as disappointing because it still wasn't the Ole Miss scholarship, right?
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. Nothing can take the place of what God does in your life. Everything else is just immaterial.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you finally realize that is when you can be at peace with your disappointment, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's something that our culture doesn't teach people.
Yeah.
And, they're not worried about a scholarship to Ole Miss. They're worried about looking a certain way.
Yeah.
They're worried about having a certain amount of money, having a certain kind of family, a certain kind of reputation, certain career, success, right? I mean, that's basically like one career versus another career. And eventually people hit a wall. Things don't go perfectly always. I mean, I can't even go through one day with things going right. Like you go to the grocery store, you pick one line, and for sure it's the line that's not going to move.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
you pull up to the red light and you pick this lane, and that's the lane that ain't going to move. It's just the way it is.
Yeah. Some guy's on the phone in front of you.
There you go. The guy who was zooming, you're like, oh, I got to get behind this guy so I don't have to get stuck. And then he's on the phone.
Yeah.
He suddenly got this important call, and he ain't paying attention to nothing.
That's correct.
If those little things don't work the way we want them to work, what makes us think everything else is going to?
Yes.
And so I think we as Christians need to challenge people more and say, what are you going to do when your plan doesn't work?
Yeah.
Because it ain't. Eventually, it won't work.
Yeah.
Anything, what's the aftermath of that December 1st, 1982? What happens specifically, like immediately after that? Any details as to how the transformation unfolded? Was it just kind of, hey, that was it. It was over. I didn't need to drink anymore. You're teaching Sunday school about turning the other cheek.
It was pretty dramatic. I just totally did a 180, and a funny story. My ex didn't believe what happened, so she actually called Brother O, my former pastor at First Assembly, to see if it was true or not, whether or not I was going to church, and gave my life to the Lord. So that's kind of funny because she knew how bad I was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you seem like a pretty good guy now.
Well, I try. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. You just don't know what kind of impact that you have or your testimony has on people. Can I tell you one story about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, please.
I ran for city council, which was a great experience back in earlier this year. And as I was going around, I ran into this young man that Jody Clement. I'll tell you, he works at the Easy Lube on Old Spanish Trail. And we got to talk, and he pulled me aside. He says, "Man, I want to thank you." I says, and I had no idea what he was talking about. He said, "As a child, you were a father figure to me. Him and my oldest son, Tommy, were friends. At church, Jody was in my Sunday school class, and Tommy, when he'd come for the summer, he'd stay all summer. My older boys, when they lived in Alabama, him and Jody got to be good friends." He said, "I'd come over to your house," and he says, "I always looked up to you as a father figure." He says, I admired the way you parented Tommy." And he said, "When I grew up, I started coaching kids. I coached Little League ball." And he says, "You had a big impact on my life." So you never know what kind of impact you have on someone.
Yeah.
It's kind of neat.
Real neat.
Yeah.
We are, everywhere we go, we're either leading people to Jesus
Yeah.
or driving people from Jesus.
Yeah. Just by your actions. Not always by your words, but how you act.
And, I'm sure you weren't perfect every day,
No.
right?
No.
And so I think we get so nervous sometimes about when we hear that, right? We just gave everybody this super, super big burden, like, hey, don't mess up.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's what it is. I don't think it's be perfect. I think it's how do you be imperfect in a way that shows Jesus to people? Yeah. Can you recognize your own imperfection? A lot of people can't.
You got to humble yourself a lot of times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's the greatest resource for humility? Jesus.
Yes.
I mean, Jesus, the God of the universe, who humbled himself to hang out with a bunch of losers like us, left the confines of bliss and joy and peace and everything in heaven to come into this mess, a train wreck of a world,
Yeah.
to endure everything it had to offer, to suffer, to die for us.
Yeah.
Right? And how do we come to Jesus? Well, first we have to know that we can't do it ourselves, and that our careers aren't going to do it for us. Our scholarships to Ole Miss aren't going to do it
Right.
for us. Our looks, it's never going to satisfy that need. It's never going to solve our problems. But Jesus comes, he dies, he rises, he wants us. He shows us this is incredible love. He shows us that he knows exactly how bad we really are, right? We're so bad. He has to come from heaven and die, but he was happy to do it.
Yes.
And so when you know how bad you already are, and you know that there's this person that knew what nobody else knows, and they came and they demonstrated love for you anyway, how can you not be willing to say, okay, I was wrong. Sorry.
Yeah, a lot of times we don't want to swallow our pride and sacrifice our desires. And I think that's what holds up a lot of people from accepting Jesus.
Big time.
It's just have to surrender totally.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe you've heard this story, but this idea of surrender, it's like we fear like we're going to lose control of our lives.
Yes.
Like if we surrender, if we give up our day, our entire life, somehow it's just going to get out of control crazy. And actually, it's the opposite. Yeah. Our lives are going to get out of control crazy the more we try to control it, and they'll get better if we let God, right? And I don't know if you've ever heard this before. There's, I forget the details. I'm sure there's more than one instance of this happening. But, somebody goes whitewater rafting. Have you ever been whitewater rafting?
I haven't.
I have not either, but I've seen enough that this makes sense. And what they tell you, I guess, is, if you fall out, you gotta, if it's really strong rapids, you can't fight the current. You can't try to swim out of it. What you really have to do is just surrender, essentially.
Yeah.
And so there's a story I heard somebody telling one time about somebody who falls out and they're trying like crazy to fight the current. The current wants to pull them down, and they fight until finally they drown. As soon as they drowned, as soon as they gave up, they got sucked under and popped right back up in a quieter place of the water. If they would have done that of their own free will before they drowned,
Yeah.
it would have just taken them under and put them right where they needed to be. And that seems like what you're describing. Is that fair? Does that sound right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, we don't want to give up control of our lives, but that's what we have to do when we surrender to Jesus.
He who seeks to save his life will lose it.
To lose it.
He who loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will find it.
Amen.
Yeah. Well, brother, you got anything you want to add?
Not really. I just appreciate the opportunity of let me come in and share my testimony.
Yeah, that's good stuff. We need more people hearing these stories and more people telling these stories. And if you ever got anything you want to share, you just let me know.
I will.
All right.
Thank you.
Hey, y'all. Jesus loves you. Jesus is far better than anything else you're striving after. And it may seem scary to surrender, but here's a guy who surrendered and finally got free of all kinds of disappointment and depression and chaos. So think about letting go and letting God, to use a overused cliche, but one that certainly applies here for Tom.
Amen.
And probably I needed to hear this just as much as you did. So taste and see that the Lord is good. Ice cream is sweet, but Jesus is far sweeter. God bless you. We'll see you.